Let's bow our heads. Father, be with us here today. Let it not be about me or about any of the band. Let all of what we do here be focused on you. Be with us as we continue the pastor search and lead the right person into the position, into being the next pastor, and let it be the person who can take this church to the next place that you want it to go. And as always, be with me as I speak, and let it not be about me or my words. Let it be all about you, all about your message for each individual person here. We love you. Amen. Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Note that we just ended on a really slow song, but I'm not actually starting the sermon because of that reason. I'm actually starting the sermon that way because as this man was shaking his son-in-law, he's trying to get him to wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. The city is going to be destroyed. We got to get out of here. We got to get out of here. What do you mean? The city is going to be destroyed. God sent some messengers. They're at my house. They told me and they said, get everyone you know out of the city because the city is going to be destroyed. God's going to destroy the city? That's ridiculous. God doesn't destroy cities. God's actually blessed our city. We're in the best place that we could have ever been. We prosper. This is like one of the best places in the entire world to live. And you're saying God is going to destroy this city? That's what his messengers came and told me, telling you need to get out of the city at dawn. He's going to do it. He's going to destroy it. I don't believe it. You're just trying to pull my leg. Go away. Even if you're my father, go away. So the father leaves his house. He goes to his other son-in-law's house. He bangs on the door. Wake up, wake up, wake up. The city's going to be destroyed. And the exact same conversation happens. And the second son-in-law rejects the warning. And so the father goes back to his house where his wife and his two daughters are hurrying, getting stuff together. And they're taking too long. The messengers are there and they say, you've got to leave now. You've got to run for the hills. Run for the hills because it's going to happen. And finally, the messengers actually drag them out of their house, out of the city, and they say, run, 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 and don't look back. God has pronounced judgment on Sodom. He's going to destroy the city. And so Lot and his wife run for the hills. But what comes next is not as amazing or as fascinating or as hard to believe as what happened a mere 18 hours before this. What happened next is interesting, but what happened 18 hours before this gives us an amazing glimpse of God, his character throughout this entire event. And so if you have your Bibles, turn with me to Genesis chapter 18. If it's a Pew Bible you're looking at, I think it's page 9. It's really close to the beginning. Genesis is the first book, and chapter 18. And we're going to be starting in verse 16. Genesis chapter 18, starting in verse 16. And this is before the men even make it to Sodom. This is God coming in with the form of a man and two angels also appearing like men. And they're talking to Abraham. They came to visit Abraham on their way to visit Sodom. Genesis 18, starting in verse 16. Then the men got up to leave. They had just finished eating. As Abraham was walking with them to see them off, they looked towards Sodom. The Lord said, I shouldn't hide what I'm going to do from Abraham. After all, Abraham is going to become a great and mighty nation, and through him all the nations of the earth will be blessed. I have chosen him so that he will direct his children and his family after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just. In this way, I, the Lord, will do what I have promised Abraham. The Lord also said, Sodom and Gomorrah have many complaints against them, and their sin is very serious. I must go down and see whether these complaints are true. If not, I will know it. I'm going to pause here for a moment because God, in this statement, is saying something that's a little hard to believe. Something actually surprised God because how bad it got. I imagine in my mind God sitting up on his throne, and he's got different angels coming and giving him reports about different things happening in the universe. And then an angel comes and says, hey, I have some bad news for you. There's some really odd things going on in the city of Sodom. And he gives his report, and the God's like, you're pulling my leg, aren't you? It can't be that bad down there. No, it's really that bad. I got to go down there and see it for myself. That's just my sanctified, maybe not so sanctified imagination, because God's saying, hey, I must go down and see whether these complaints are true or not. And that just, side note, baffles my mind. But anyways, God comes down personally to investigate this situation. From there, the men turned and went on to Sodom, but Abraham remained standing in front of the Lord. Now, here's where things get really interesting. Because Abraham, he knows what Sodom, Gomorrah, the villages around that region were like, and he knows what these three men are going to find when they get there. The rumors, the complaints, all of that stuff, Abraham knows is true, and he doesn't hold out much hope for the city. But he knows his nephew is there, Lot. And so this dueling thought saying God's going to destroy the city, he's told me this. But I don't want Lot to die. This thought just whirls through his head. It's like, okay, how bad is it going to be? How bad is it got to be? And so Abraham gets up some courage. So when the two angels had left, and God's still standing there by him, he builds up enough courage to ask this somewhat audacious question, this audacious idea. Starts off, Abraham came closer and asked, are you really going to sweep away the innocent with the guilty? What if, okay, hypothetically speaking, what if there are 50 innocent people in the city? Are you really going to sweep these innocent people away? Wouldn't you spare that place for the sake of the 50 innocent people who are in it? And come on, God, it would be unthinkable for you to do such a thing, to treat the innocent people like the guilty, to kill the innocent with the guilty. It's just not like your character, God. You're loving God. And really, that just would be unthinkable. Wouldn't the judge of the entire earth do something that's fair? Come on, God. No, I definitely agree that there's people in Sodom that are worthy of destruction, but it's not really fair in my mind that if there's 50 righteous people that you kill them with the rest of the people. And as I did a little bit of research, uncovering a little bit more about Sodom and Gomorrah, there's different archaeological reports estimate that there could have been anywhere from 10,000 to over 100,000 people living in that valley. And so Abraham's asking, is there 50 people out of, say, we'll average it out and say maybe the size of Meridian. 50 people in Meridian. If 50 innocent people are there, would you still destroy that city? And so God responds, if I find 50 innocent people inside the city of Sodom, I will spare the whole place for their sake. That's amazing. 50 people in a city, in an area that's maybe 50,000, 60,000 people. That just gives a mind-baffling glimpse of God and how much grace he has, even though there's still that little bit of destruction. even so there's still that little bit of judgment. There's so much more grace that he would be willing to spare a place for just 50. But now Abraham's starting to realize maybe I should have counted a little, like, let's see, there's Lot, there's his wife, there's some kids, there's maybe some servants. There's not even anywhere close to 50. So God, I may have spoken a little hasty before. So if I may be so bold to ask you, although I'm dust, I probably deserve that destruction too. What if there's only 45 people? What if there's only 45 people? Like 50 is a good number, but what about that margin of error? Like 45. Will you destroy the city because it's only like 5 less people? Like what if it's almost at the mark, but they just didn't make that 50? So God responds, I will not destroy it if I find 45 there. That's amazing, like both Abraham's boldness as well as God's just sharing freely with them. And this dialogue continues. Well, and Abraham's still thinking, like, not even sure I can get 45 people. So what if 40 are found there? And God answered, for the sake of 40, I will not do it. Abraham's getting a little interested, a little more curious, like exactly how low, like where's that number? Like, this is just my imagination, how this conversation takes place. And so he continues, please don't be angry. Please don't be angry if I speak again. But what if 30? I know 40 is a good number, but what about 30? And he answered, if I find 30 there, I will not do it. This is fascinating, just how much grace there is in this simple dialogue. And then Abraham's kind of getting a little nervous, like he doesn't want to push God too far, but he's still kind of curious. And so he says, look now, if I may be so bold as to ask you, I know you've been generous at answering these other questions. I think I may have been a little bit too high before. Yeah, a little bit too high before. What about 20? What about 20? And God answered, I will not destroy it for the sake of the 20. 20 people out of 50 or 60,000 people. That's amazing. Then Abraham now has a problem because he's still counting up in his head. There's Lot, there's Lot's wife, there's a couple kids, there's a couple son-in-laws, there's maybe a few servants. I'm not even sure if there's 20. But I know that they like it down there. I know that they're good people. But I don't want to see them get destroyed. And so Abraham says, okay. One more question. I know you've been very generous. And please don't be angry if I speak only one more time. Just one more question. What if only 10? What if only 10 people are there? I'm sure there's 10 people. What if only 10 people are there? Would you destroy the city for 10 people? And God responds, I will not destroy it for the sake of the 10. 10 people. And then the Lord finished speaking to Abraham. He left Abraham and returned home. 10 people. That's like 1% of 1%. And God wouldn't give up hope on a city that's completely full of wickedness and corruption just because of that small little, tiny amount. God would spare everything. God has much more hope than you or I, or at least I can speak for myself. I might say maybe 1%. Like if there's 99 bad people and one good person, I might say, well, that good person doesn't really have much of a shot. But God's looking at this more along the lines of, if there's 100 people and one person, I'm holding out hope. Or even 1,000 people, there's one person holding out hope. Or even 10,000 people, compared to that one person, he's still holding out hope. And that's baffling to my mind. But then we come back to this initial question, this initial where we started, because as we began, we see Lot, and his family, his wife and his 2 daughters, fleeing the city, meaning that there wasn't even 10 people. What could have been so bad that would have caused God to lose hope in that city, in that valley that had Sodom and Gomorrah and a couple small towns? There's a lot of speculation about exactly what was the reason God chose to mark Sodom and Gomorrah for destruction. There's a number of different verses, a number of different passages that kind of give us a glimpse of potential possible reasons, but instead of speculating with you, I want to share with you one passage, and this is God actually speaking through the prophet Ezekiel. And he's comparing Jerusalem's track, the direction that they're headed, with the direction that Sodom had gone. And then in this passage, God says, and here's what was really bothering me about Sodom and why I'd lost hope. And so if you have your Bibles, you can flip over to Ezekiel, or you can read it up on the screen. Ezekiel chapter 16, and we're going to start in verse 49 and 50. And God's saying, this is what your sister Sodom has done wrong. He's referencing Jerusalem, and he's saying, hey, you're part of that same family. You're part of that same train of thought that Sodom was on. This is what your sister Sodom has done wrong. She and her daughters were proud that they had plenty of food and had peace and security. So first off, pride had entered their hearts. They got to the place where they said, we don't need anybody or anything else. We're completely self-sufficient. We don't need you, God. We don't need anybody else around. So this is the first reason. And when you get to the place where you don't feel as though you need anybody else, something else kind of is a byproduct of that. Something else starts happening, and that's that you start rejecting the people who need help. So once you've fallen into this trap of pride, then you're so inward focused that you then reject the cries for help from the poor and the needy that may come your way. You become so inward and so closed. So the rejection of helping those who are needy, that's another reason God said, hey, Sodom and Gomorrah, this is something that they did that just, it's not right. It's not part of my character. I blessed them with some of the nicest area in the world to build a city in, but that was to be a blessing for others. That wasn't to be a blessing for them to turn inward. So there's pride, there's rejecting, helping the needy, but there's more. They were arrogant. The next step in this cycle is that they were arrogant. Once you had pride into your hearts, you become so self-focused, you rejected everything else, then you start puffing yourself up. I'm pretty good. I'm better than you. And I become arrogant. And the next step in that cycle is that they just did disgusting things in front of him. They perverted everything that God had wanted to remain pure. And this is more than just about sexuality. This is about everything in their culture. They had twisted it and perverted it. And this cycle is a loop. And so it inches, and it inches further and further with each cycle of the loop until it got to the place where God lost hope. So I did away with them when I saw this. There was so much going on in Sodom and Gomorrah that God lost hope. I know that it's hard to believe, it's baffling in even my own mind, but God didn't always lose hope for Sodom and Gomorrah. He could look at the future, he could see what was going to happen, but the city was spared several times prior to this. And in my mind, it's because several chapters before the destruction, Abraham and Lot get together. they've been living together in the same area, but they've gotten so independently wealthy that they can't actually stay together. Their servants have gotten into disputes and fights, saying, "Oh, who's your sheep and who's my sheep?" Our flocks can't intermingle anymore because there's just too many of them. And so Abraham and Lot go up on a mountain, and they say, and Abraham asked Lot, "Hey, we got to split up. We're not going to be friends anymore, but we need to go our separate ways just for the sake of our sanity." Servants just keep on bickering amongst themselves. And so Abraham says, "Hey, do you want the valley where Sodom and Gomorrah and it's a nice valley, or do you want the mountains?" And so Lot said, "Hey, I'll take the valley." And so they parted their ways. And what's fascinating about that event, as it ties in with all of this, is that Lot was the whole idea that I believe actually God sent Lot to the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah to be a witness to a different way. And when Lot went there, I don't think it had gotten nearly as bad as what it had gotten. Because as Lot, we can kind of see that he, in some of the different stories and different accounts, he wasn't really part of the city, but he was accepted by the city. But as I looked in a little bit more to Sodom and Gomorrah and some of the traditions and some of the history that surrounded that area and that time period in the Bible, the people of Sodom and Gomorrah were incredibly opposed to both poor people and to outsiders. There's traditions that go around that even get it so bad that if you were a poor person, you came to Sodom, they would give you what you believed to be as a gift. This is if they were actually kind of being quote unquote nice. They'd give you a gift of a gold bar that was stamped and engraved with your name on it. So you're like, "Well, that's pretty nice. They're being nice to me." But then none of the merchants in the area would sell you anything if you tried to use that. And so you would end up starving to death because nobody would do business with you if they saw that you had that gold bar. And after you had died, the gold bar would be returned to the person who gave it to you. That's the nice option. There's other traditions. And actually, there's a tradition in the Jewish oral history that actually is the predecessor and the reason why the Jews believed that God actually singled out Sodom and Gomorrah for destruction. That angel coming in with the message, I don't know if you're going to believe it's this bad down there, but this is what actually just happened. This is what the Jewish oral tradition has said happened. A beggar came into the city, into Sodom, and they went to the well that was at the center of the city, and they took up residence there. And I don't think anybody in the city wanted to, they kind of marked this person and say, "We're just going to ignore him. We're going to ignore him. Let's see if he goes away. We don't want him here. We're not going to abuse him. We're just going to completely shun and ignore him." But as time went on, this man just kept living there, and as a bunch of the people started asking questions, how is this man even surviving? We don't see him with any food. There's the well there, there's water there that he's able to pull up for himself. We need to probably take care of that. But how is he even surviving without food? So they set up some spies to kind of watch what was going on, and they discovered that Lot's niece and another girl were slowly slipping this guy breadcrumbs. They were slowly being nice to this guy. And when they found that out, they killed one girl. And then with the crumbs, there was honey. And so they took the other girl and they smeared her with honey and they plastered her, hung her up on the wall outside the city and let the hornets kill her. And Jewish tradition says that the screams that this girl cried as the hornets were eating her were the screams that reached heaven, and baffled the mind of God. This not just antisocial. It's really completely opposed to anything, any openness to helping somebody. And this is what prompted God to come down and say, hey, this city is probably beyond saving. And so Lot and his wife and his 2 daughters are fleeing the city. But while we initially think that there's 4 righteous people, one person, the last thing that the angel said is, don't look back. Don't look back. Run for the hills and don't look back. But on their way to a town that's right at the base of the hills, Lot's wife looks back. And this isn't to look back to say, hey, is there a storm cloud brewing? Or I wonder if God's actually starting to enact his judgment. This is a look back of longing, of what am I leaving behind? Because even though she was outside of the city, her heart was still there. And the instant her eyes rested on the city wall, she turned to a pillar of salt. To a pillar of salt. The whole family, Lot, his wife, his daughters, I believe they were sent to Sodom. They chose to go there, but I think God had it in the entire narrative of Abraham, Lot, Sodom and Gomorrah, all of the chapters that deal with this and the story and the narratives that go around with this, because there's a lot more in the Bible than what we're touching on this morning about what happened here. But I believe that they were sent to Sodom to be salt, not to be turned into salt. To be salt, to be that small 10, maybe 20, maybe 30, maybe 40 people that could slowly enact change in a culture and shift it and turn it around. The idea of being salt. It wouldn't be until another 1800, 2000, somewhere in there years later, that this idea would be brought out even further when Jesus was walking around on earth. And in his sermon, his famous Sermon on the Mount, he gives the Beatitudes. And in the Beatitudes, this is found in Matthew chapter 5. You can start flipping there. Matthew chapter 5, he gives this list of Beatitudes, this list of characteristics that people who are down and out, or that people who are humble, or people who are godlike have, and then the result of how God is going to bless them. And immediately following his list of Beatitudes, he says this. Matthew chapter 5, verse 13. You are salt for the earth. But if salt loses its taste, how will it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled on by people. If salt is not salt, if salt isn't adding to anything, then it's worthless. It's like sand on the road. Maybe a little bit of use to keep you from stubbing your toe, but that's about it. And in this teaching from Jesus, he says, you are salt. This isn't you are sometimes salt. This is you are salt. You and I here today are salt. Every word that we say, every decision that we make, every single thing that we even write or post online is salt. Because salt is another word for influence, for how your presence is affecting other people. You and I are salt. And there's two ways that this idea can go. You can be salt that builds up. You can be salt that helps bring people together, salt that helps elevate people to something higher, to a new standard, to help people feel loved and accepted. Or you can be salt that tears people down. Salt that is more interested in reaction, in lashing back, in seeing how you can rile people up. We are all salt. But we are all still here. There's a handful of people here in this room today, and we make up a group of people that's larger than 10, that's larger than 20. And I believe that God's looking down and he's saying, I'm going to spare this whole valley using God's math. Using the 1% of 1% of maybe even 1 more percent, depending upon how God actually calculates this out. He's saying, I would save this entire valley just for the people in this room. Just for the sake of the people in this room. So that you and I can be salt. Be the influence that leads people to the cross, to Jesus, to the only way that we can live, the only way that we can move forward, and the only way that we can be saved, certain for eternity. You and I are salt. And as the band comes back up, the real key message that I want you to understand today is that the reason why we are still here is not only because we are salt and because God has given us a little bit more time, it's because God still has hope in you and I, in our ability to impact what's going on outside of these walls and leading people to him. He has given us the warning that there will be an end to all of this. But while we are still here, God still has hope. And while there's still hope, we still have the mission of salt.